Have you ever opened a door expecting a fresh start, only to find the one person you spent years trying to forget standing on the other side? That was the exact question running through Ethan Brooks's mind as he pushed open the apartment door with one hand while balancing two overstuffed duffel bags on his shoulder. The moving truck had already disappeared down the street. The July heat wrapped around the neighborhood like a heavy blanket, and all Ethan wanted was a cold shower and 8 uninterrupted hours of sleep. Losing his marketing job in Chicago 3 weeks earlier had felt like watching someone erase the future he thought he had planned. The offer in Seattle was his second chance, and this apartment, affordable only because it came with a roommate, was supposed to be the beginning of something better. He stepped inside, noticing the familiar scent of fresh coffee drifting through the air and the quiet hum of an old jazz playlist somewhere deeper in the apartment. It felt strangely comforting, almost familiar, until a voice floated in from the kitchen. "You're finally here." Ethan froze before he even saw him. That voice had once been part of his everyday life, woven into late-night study sessions, grocery runs, cheap pizza dinners, and conversations that lasted until sunrise. Slowly, almost afraid his memory was playing an elaborate joke, he turned the corner. Noah Carter looked up from the kitchen island, holding a ceramic coffee mug in one hand. He looked older than Ethan remembered, not dramatically different, just steadier somehow. His dark brown hair was shorter now, a little neater around the edges, and the easy smile Ethan used to know had been replaced by an expression somewhere between surprise and disbelief. Neither of them spoke. For several long seconds, the apartment seemed impossibly quiet, as though even the refrigerator had stopped humming just to watch what happened next. Ethan searched for something clever to say, but every sentence disappeared before reaching his mouth. College memories arrived without permission. Sharing a cramped apartment. Fighting over whose turn it was to buy groceries. Laughing over burnt pancakes. Watching movies neither of them actually liked just because the other one wanted to. Then graduation. Different cities. Busy careers. Fewer texts. Missed birthdays. Eventually, silence. "Ethan," Noah finally said, breaking the spell with a small, uncertain laugh. "I guess we're roommates again." Ethan let out an awkward chuckle that sounded nothing like confidence. Apparently, the universe has a weird sense of humor. Noah rubbed the back of his neck. "I honestly had no idea it was you. The landlord just told me someone new was moving in today." "Same here," Ethan admitted. "If I'd known." He stopped himself before finishing the sentence because he wasn't entirely sure how it ended. Would he have chosen somewhere else? Or would part of him have secretly hoped for exactly this? Noah stepped aside and gestured toward the hallway. "Your room's the one at the end. I cleared out the closet yesterday." Such a simple sentence. Such an ordinary gesture. Yet Ethan noticed something almost immediately. Noah still remembered that he hated cramped closets. He still remembered. That realization settled somewhere deep inside Ethan's chest, quiet but impossible to ignore. Maybe moving into this apartment wasn't the fresh start he thought he wanted. Maybe it was something far more complicated. And for the first time in years, the future no longer felt predictable. Ethan spent the next hour pretending to unpack, while secretly trying to convince himself that his heartbeat was perfectly normal. It was amazing how quickly a cardboard box labeled kitchen could become fascinating when the alternative was making eye contact with Noah Carter. Every few minutes, he caught himself listening for footsteps in the hallway, the quiet clink of dishes, or the soft sound of cabinet doors opening and closing. The apartment itself was comfortable without trying too hard. Warm sunlight spilled through wide windows overlooking a tree-lined street, where people walked their dogs and children rode bicycles without a care in the world. It looked like the kind of neighborhood where life moved at a gentler pace. Yet Ethan felt as though he had stepped into the busiest intersection of his own memories. Around 6 o'clock, his stomach reminded him that airport coffee and a stale granola bar did not qualify as dinner. He stepped into the kitchen just as Noah pulled a tray from the oven. The familiar smell of roasted vegetables and grilled chicken filled the room. Noah glanced over his shoulder with an easy smile that looked almost accidental. "I was not sure what time you would finish unpacking, so I made enough for 2. Unless you already have plans." Ethan blinked. "No, I actually do not." "Good," Noah replied. "It would be a shame to waste perfectly decent food." Ethan laughed quietly, surprised by how natural it felt. They sat across from each other at the small wooden table near the window. The silence was not uncomfortable exactly. It was careful, like two people trying to cross an old bridge without testing how much weight it could still hold. Noah broke the quiet first. "How is Seattle treating you so far?" Ethan shrugged. "I have seen the airport, the freeway, this apartment, and exactly one grocery store." "That sounds about right for your first day. How long have you lived here?" "Almost 2 years." Ethan nodded. "You like it?" Noah looked around the apartment before answering. "It has been home." Something about the way he said the word lingered longer than it should have. Ethan remembered another apartment years earlier, one with squeaky floors, mismatched furniture, and a refrigerator that sounded like it was preparing for takeoff every night at 2 in the morning. They had complained about that place constantly, yet somehow it had become one of his favorite memories. Noah stood to refill their glasses with iced tea. Without thinking, he reached into a cabinet and grabbed the blue glass Ethan had always preferred over every other cup they owned. He stopped halfway through the motion, noticing what he had done. Ethan noticed too. Neither of them mentioned it. Later, while washing the dishes together, Ethan reached automatically for the towel hanging beside the sink. Noah handed it to him before he even asked. Their fingers brushed for less than a second. Nothing dramatic, nothing anyone else would have noticed, but both of them pulled back at the exact same moment. Ethan cleared his throat. Funny how muscle memory works. Noah smiled without looking up from the sink. Some habits stick around longer than we expect. After dinner, Ethan wandered into the living room and noticed an old framed photograph tucked between several books on the shelf. It showed a group of college friends smiling outside their campus library. He and Noah stood shoulder to shoulder in the back row, laughing at something the camera had failed to capture. Ethan stared at the picture a little longer than he intended. Behind him, Noah spoke softly, almost to himself. "I never found a reason to throw that one away." Ethan did not answer right away because, for reasons he could not fully explain, he was suddenly wondering if some things had been waiting patiently all along, even when both of them believed they had already been left behind. The next morning, Ethan woke to the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifting beneath his bedroom door. For one sleepy second, his mind wandered backward 5 years, to cramped college mornings when Noah always claimed he was only making coffee for himself, even though there was inevitably a second mug waiting on the counter. Ethan smiled before catching himself. That life was over. Or at least it was supposed to be. He walked into the kitchen wearing a faded university sweatshirt and stopped short. 2 steaming mugs sat neatly beside the coffee maker. Noah looked up from his laptop, noticing Ethan's expression almost immediately. "I guess you still take 1 cream and no sugar," he said cautiously. Ethan stared at the cup before looking back at Noah. "You remember that?" Noah gave a small shrug that somehow carried years of unspoken history. Some things are easy to forget. Others never really leave. Ethan picked up the mug, taking a careful sip. It tasted exactly the way he remembered. Warm, smooth, familiar. It was ridiculous that something as ordinary as coffee could make his chest feel unexpectedly heavy. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Ethan completed paperwork for his new job, while Noah joined video meetings from the dining table. They rarely interrupted each other, yet a strange rhythm formed. Naturally, one would refill the water pitcher before it was empty. The other would open a window when the apartment became too warm. Neither asked. Neither needed to. Around lunchtime, Ethan volunteered to run to the neighborhood grocery store. Noah handed him a short shopping list. "Only buy what we actually need," Noah called after him with a teasing smile. "I still remember the great cereal incident." Ethan laughed out loud. "That happened once. You bought 12 family-sized boxes because they were on sale. Financially, it was an excellent decision. We were 2 college students living in a 700-square-foot apartment." "Exactly. We were prepared." By the time Ethan returned 40 minutes later carrying reusable grocery bags, Seattle's bright morning had disappeared beneath thick gray clouds. Rain tapped gently against the windows as he unpacked everything onto the kitchen counter. Noah reached into one bag and pulled out a container of blueberry yogurt. "You still buy this brand?" Ethan blinked. "Apparently." Noah smiled quietly. "You used to eat one every Tuesday because the dining hall always served terrible tacos." Ethan laughed so hard he nearly dropped a carton of eggs. "I completely forgot about that." "I did not." The answer came so naturally that neither of them spoke for several seconds afterward. Rain continued drumming softly outside while the apartment, filled with the comforting sounds of groceries finding their places on shelves, and inside cabinets. Ethan noticed Noah still organized everything with handwritten labels, just as he had years ago. Pasta, rice, coffee, tea. It should have felt silly, yet instead it made the apartment feel lived in, cared for. That evening the rain grew heavier until thunder rolled somewhere beyond the skyline. Without warning, every light flickered once, then disappeared. The apartment fell into complete darkness except for the pale gray glow filtering through the rain-soaked windows. Ethan heard Noah laugh softly from somewhere across the room. "Well," Noah said, "apparently Seattle wants to welcome you properly." Ethan smiled into the darkness. "Please tell me you still keep emergency candles." "Hey." Drawer slid open, followed by another. Noah answered with unmistakable satisfaction. "Top drawer. Left side. Exactly where they have always been." Ethan stood perfectly still. Somehow, without realizing it, both of them had just admitted the same impossible truth. No matter how many years had passed, they still remembered where the other would instinctively look first. Noah struck a match, and a small golden flame pushed back the darkness just enough for the apartment to feel smaller, quieter, and somehow far more familiar. One candle became two, then three, until gentle pools of light danced across the walls and reflected softly against the windows where rain continued tracing crooked paths down the glass. Ethan carried the candles into the living room while Noah disappeared into the hallway closet and returned with an old blue blanket. "I cannot believe you still have this," Ethan said, recognizing the faded plaid pattern immediately. Noah unfolded it across the couch with a sheepish smile. "It survived 3 apartments. I figured it deserved a promotion." Ethan laughed. "This thing has probably seen more late-night movies than any theater in Seattle." They settled onto opposite ends of the couch, leaving a polite gap between them that somehow felt much larger than the few inches of cushion. Outside, thunder rumbled softly, not frightening, just distant enough to make the apartment feel like its own little world. Noah leaned back and glanced toward the rain. "Remember when the power went out during finals?" Ethan smiled before Noah even finished the sentence. "You insisted we could study by flashlight. You said it looked like we were telling ghost stories." "Because it did. And then we spent 4 hours talking instead of studying." Ethan chuckled. "We both failed that quiz. Worth it." The answer came so quickly that Noah seemed surprised by his own honesty. Silence settled between them again, but this time it felt warmer. Ethan watched the candlelight flicker across Noah's face, noticing details he had somehow forgotten. The tiny scar near his eyebrow from a pickup basketball game. The faint smile lines that had not been there in college. The calm confidence that had quietly replaced the restless energy Noah once carried everywhere. "You changed," Ethan said without thinking. Noah looked over. "Hopefully for the better." "I think so." Noah smiled faintly. "You changed too." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "How?" "You used to fill every silence with words." Ethan looked down at the candle in his hands. "Maybe life taught me to listen more." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "Or maybe life gave us too many things we never said." Ethan felt those words settle heavily between them. He searched for an easy joke, something light enough to redirect the conversation, but nothing arrived. Instead, he found himself asking the question that had quietly lingered since he walked through the apartment door. "Why did we stop talking?" Noah did not answer immediately. Rain tapped steadily against the windows while the candlelight trembled between them. Finally, he exhaled. "I asked myself that more times than I can count." Ethan frowned. "I thought you got busy. New city, new job, new friends." Noah looked genuinely confused. "Ethan, I thought you were the one who stopped replying." Ethan blinked. "What?" "I sent messages." Noah spoke carefully, almost as though he were afraid of breaking something fragile. "Birthday texts, holiday messages, even an email after you moved. After a while I figured, maybe you wanted a clean break." Ethan stared at him, his heartbeat suddenly louder than the rain outside. "Noah, I never got them." Noah's expression slowly shifted from confusion to disbelief. "None of them." Ethan shook his head. "Not one." The room fell completely still. Two people who had spent years believing they had been forgotten were suddenly facing a possibility neither had ever imagined. Somewhere outside, the neighborhood lights flickered back to life one building at a time, but neither Ethan nor Noah moved to turn the lamps on. For the first time since seeing each other again, the darkness no longer felt like something standing between them. It felt like a place where long-buried questions were finally beginning to find their way into the light. Morning arrived with clear skies, as though the storm had carried something heavy away during the night. Ethan stood in the kitchen staring at his phone while waiting for the coffee maker to finish brewing. He had spent nearly an hour before bed scrolling through old email accounts, searching spam folders, forgotten inboxes, and archived messages. There was nothing from Noah. Not a single birthday greeting. Not one holiday wish. Either they had disappeared somewhere between old servers and abandoned accounts, or life had quietly erased the evidence before either of them knew it mattered. Noah wandered into the kitchen wearing a navy sweatshirt and offered Ethan a sleepy smile. "Did you sleep at all?" Ethan laughed softly. "Not much." "Me neither." Noah reached into the refrigerator for orange juice before stopping. "I kept thinking about last night." Ethan looked up. "Me too." Before either of them could continue, Noah's phone buzzed across the countertop. The screen lit up with a calendar reminder. Noah glanced down and sighed. "I almost forgot. My friend Olivia invited me to lunch today. She has been asking for weeks." Ethan nodded casually. "You should go. You could come if you want. She remembers hearing stories about you from college." Ethan smiled politely. "Maybe another time. I still have paperwork to finish before Monday." Noah studied him for a second, almost as though he wanted to say something else, but simply nodded. "All right. I will not be gone long." Around noon, the apartment became unusually quiet after Noah left. Ethan opened his laptop, determined to focus, but his attention wandered every few minutes toward the empty chair across the room. He finally gave up and decided to organize another box that had remained unopened since moving day. Inside were old notebooks, ticket stubs, faded photographs, and a worn blue folder from college. As he sorted through everything, a folded piece of paper slipped onto the floor. It was a campus newspaper from their senior year. Someone had circled an article announcing Noah's acceptance into a prestigious internship in Boston. On the bottom corner, written in Ethan's own handwriting, were 5 simple words. "Tell him you are proud." Ethan stared at the note for a long moment. He never had. A little after 3 o'clock, the apartment door opened. Noah stepped inside, carrying 2 paper bakery bags that filled the room with the comforting smell of cinnamon and fresh bread. "I brought pastries," he called. Olivia insisted. Ethan walked into the kitchen just as Noah unpacked everything. "How is she?" Noah smiled. "Still talks faster than anyone I know." He hesitated before adding, "She asked if we were getting along." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And what did you tell her?" Noah looked down at the bakery box before answering. "I told her it feels like someone pressed pause 5 years ago, and neither of us knows how to press play again." Ethan felt that sentence settle quietly inside him. Before he could respond, Noah reached into one of the bags and pulled out a small lemon muffin. "This one is yours." Ethan blinked. "How did you know I would pick that?" Noah looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Because you always pick the lemon one." Ethan accepted it with a quiet thank you, realizing once again that Noah's memory had preserved details Ethan himself had almost forgotten. As they sat near the window sharing pastries while afternoon sunlight replaced the previous night's rain, Ethan found himself wondering something he had not allowed himself to consider before. If Noah remembered all of these little things after 5 years apart, what else had he quietly been carrying all this time? The following week slipped into an easy rhythm that neither Ethan nor Noah acknowledged out loud. Mornings began with shared coffee, afternoons disappeared into work, and evenings somehow ended with both of them in the kitchen at the same time, preparing dinner without discussing who was responsible for what. It was as if years apart had erased nothing except the calendar itself. Ethan caught himself smiling more often than he had in months. Even the apartment seemed brighter. On Thursday afternoon, while Ethan was settling into his new office, his phone buzzed with an unexpected message from an unfamiliar number. "This is Olivia. Noah gave me your number after lunch last week. I hope that is okay. I think there is something you deserve to know." Ethan frowned. Before replying that it was fine. A few moments later, another message appeared. "Would you have time for coffee after work?" Curiosity outweighed hesitation. They met at a quiet neighborhood cafe overlooking a small park where families strolled beneath tall maple trees. Olivia greeted Ethan with an easy smile that immediately explained why Noah trusted her. After a few minutes of light conversation, she wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and looked at Ethan carefully. "I have been debating whether I should tell you this." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "Tell me what?" Olivia sighed softly. After college, Noah was supposed to move on. Everyone expected him to, but he never really did. Ethan stayed silent. He dated? Olivia shook her head. Not seriously. Every time someone tried to set him up, he found an excuse. Work, timing, distance. He always smiled, but it never lasted. Ethan stared at the steam rising from his coffee. He never told me any of that. Because he thought you chose to disappear. Olivia's voice remained gentle. He believed you stopped answering because you wanted a different life. He respected what he thought was your decision, even if it broke his heart. Ethan blinked slowly. He never said anything. Noah is very good at carrying things quietly. She smiled with a hint of sadness. Sometimes too good. Ethan struggled to find words. 5 years. 5 years built on a misunderstanding neither of them had created on purpose. Before leaving, Olivia reached into her bag and hesitated. I probably should not have this anymore. She placed a weathered white envelope on the table. Ethan recognized Noah's handwriting immediately. His own name was written neatly across the front. The envelope had never been sealed. He wrote it the week before graduation, Olivia explained. He asked me whether he should give it to you. I told him yes. A few days later, he said it was too late and asked me to throw it away. I never could. Ethan held the envelope carefully, almost afraid it might disappear if he breathed too hard. I have never opened it, Olivia added. It belongs to you. The walk home felt strangely unreal. The envelope rested safely. Inside Ethan's jacket pocket, growing heavier with every block he crossed. He reached the apartment just after sunset. Noah was standing in the kitchen stirring a pot of homemade tomato soup, smiling the moment Ethan stepped inside. Perfect timing, Noah said. Dinner is almost ready. Ethan smiled back, but his hand instinctively touched the envelope hidden inside his jacket. Noah had no idea that 5 years of unanswered questions were resting only inches away from his heart. That night, Ethan waited until the apartment had fallen completely silent before taking the unopened envelope from his jacket. He sat beside his bedroom window while the city lights shimmered beyond the glass, turning the white paper over in his hands as though it might answer every question before he even unfolded it. His name was written across the front in Noah's unmistakable handwriting, steady and careful, exactly the way Ethan remembered from countless shared lecture notes and grocery lists taped to old refrigerators. He took a slow breath and opened it. The letter was surprisingly short. Noah had never been someone who needed many words to make them matter. It began with a simple sentence. If you are reading this, then I finally found the courage I have been borrowing from you for 4 years. Ethan smiled sadly before continuing. Noah wrote about their first week as college roommates, when Ethan had introduced himself by apologizing for owning too many books. He wrote about late-night conversations, terrible homemade dinners, road trips that never went according to plan, and how ordinary moments had quietly become the happiest parts of his life. Toward the end, the handwriting grew slightly less even, as though Noah had paused several times before continuing. I do not know what our lives will look like after graduation, and I do not want to make things difficult for you. I only know that somewhere along the way you became the person I look for first in every room. If you do not feel the same, nothing has to change. I would rather keep you as my best friend than lose you completely. But if there is even the smallest chance that you have ever looked at me the way I look at you, then maybe this is worth saying before life carries us in different directions. Ethan lowered the page before reaching the final line because his vision had blurred. 5 years. 5 years built around a letter that had never reached its destination. He folded it carefully and slipped it back into the envelope just as a soft knock sounded outside his bedroom door. Ethan, Noah's voice came gently through the wood. Are you still awake? Ethan quickly stood and opened the door. Noah held 2 mugs of hot chocolate with an embarrassed smile. I could not sleep, he admitted. I thought maybe you could not either. Ethan accepted one of the mugs, grateful for something to do with his hands. They walked quietly onto the apartment balcony where cool evening air carried the scent of rain-washed cedar trees. Cars drifted along the distant streets below like slow-moving ribbons of light. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. They simply leaned against the railing, sipping hot chocolate while the city settled into the calm rhythm of another ordinary night. Finally, Noah broke the silence. Can I ask you something? Ethan nodded. When we met again, were you nervous? Ethan laughed softly. Terrified. Noah smiled into his mug. Good. Ethan looked over. Good. Noah nodded. Because I thought I was the only one. They shared an easy laugh that felt lighter than any conversation they had managed since becoming roommates again. Yet inside Ethan's jacket pocket, the letter rested quietly against his chest, changing the meaning of every smile, every remembered habit, and every unanswered question. He realized then that the hardest part was no longer wondering how the past had gone wrong. The hardest part was deciding whether he was finally brave enough to tell Noah that the answer to a 5-year-old letter had never been no. The next evening, Ethan came home earlier than usual, the unopened envelope now carefully folded inside his desk drawer after he had read it more times than he wanted to admit. The words had stayed with him throughout the entire workday, quietly interrupting meetings, emails, and conversations until he could no longer pretend they belonged only to the past. As he stepped into the apartment, he noticed several cardboard boxes stacked neatly beside the hallway wall. His smile faded almost instantly. Noah emerged from his bedroom, carrying another box filled with books. "Oh," Noah said, sounding almost startled to see him. "You are home early." Ethan looked at the boxes before meeting Noah's eyes. "Are you going somewhere?" Noah hesitated just long enough for Ethan to notice. "Not exactly." "Then why are you packing?" Noah set the box down carefully and rubbed the back of his neck, a familiar habit Ethan had seen countless times in college whenever Noah was searching for the right words. "I have been thinking." Ethan forced a small laugh that carried no real amusement. "That usually worries me." Noah smiled faintly, but it disappeared almost immediately. "The landlord has another unit opening next month. I was considering moving." Ethan felt as though the room had quietly tilted beneath his feet. "Moving?" Noah nodded without looking directly at him. "When you arrived, I thought maybe this could be simple. We would catch up, become friends again, and eventually everything would feel normal." He let out a slow breath. "But it does not." Ethan stared at him. "Because of me?" Noah answered honestly. "Because every day reminds me how much I missed having you around, and I do not think pretending otherwise is helping either of us." Silence settled over the apartment. The refrigerator hummed softly in the background while late afternoon sunlight stretched across the hardwood floor. Ethan reached into his backpack and slowly removed the white envelope. Noah's expression changed the moment he recognized it. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. "Olivia." Noah closed his eyes for a brief second. "She kept it." Ethan nodded. "I read it." Noah looked almost embarrassed, as though he wished the floor would kindly open beneath him. "You were never supposed to." "I know." Ethan stepped closer, holding the letter gently between both hands. "But maybe I should have." Noah gave a soft, defeated laugh. 5 years late. Better than never. Noah finally looked up. Ethan saw uncertainty there, but also hope so carefully, hidden that it almost hurt to witness it. "Everything you wrote," Ethan continued. "I never rejected it because I never saw it. I spent years believing you had simply moved on." Noah blinked slowly. "I thought the exact same thing about you." Ethan shook his head with a small smile full of disbelief. "We wasted 5 years because 2 messages disappeared and 1 letter stayed in a drawer." Noah laughed quietly, the sound carrying equal parts sadness and relief. "That sounds like something life would do." Ethan took one more step until only a comfortable distance remained between them. "Do not move out." Noah searched Ethan's face carefully, almost afraid he had misunderstood. "Are you sure?" Ethan smiled, this time without hesitation. "I spent 5 years losing you once. I am not interested in helping you leave a second time." Noah's eyes glistened as a genuine smile slowly returned, warmer than any Ethan had seen since opening the apartment door on his first day. For the first time, neither of them reached for the past. Instead, they stood quietly in the middle of the living room, realizing that the future they thought had disappeared years ago might finally be waiting exactly where they had found each other again. The apartment felt different after that conversation, not because anything around them had changed, but because neither Ethan nor Noah had anything left to hide behind. The awkward silences that had once been filled with uncertainty slowly transformed into comfortable quiet, the kind shared by people who no longer felt the need to guess what the other was thinking. A few weeks later, Saturday morning sunlight poured through the windows while Noah stood in the kitchen attempting to make pancakes. The first one folded in half. The second one looked suspiciously like the state of Texas. Ethan leaned against the counter laughing so hard, he nearly spilled his coffee. Some traditions really do survive everything, he teased. Noah pointed the spatula at him. You are welcome to take over. Absolutely not. Watching you lose to breakfast is much more entertaining. Noah laughed, and the sound filled the apartment with the same warmth Ethan remembered from years ago. After breakfast, they spent the afternoon reorganizing the living room, replacing old furniture, hanging framed photographs, and finally unpacking the last forgotten moving box. Inside was a small wireless router that Ethan had purchased after starting his new job. It needs a network name, Noah said, opening the settings on his laptop. Any ideas? Ethan looked around the apartment. The bookshelf now held both of their favorite novels. 2 coffee mugs rested beside the sink. A blue blanket still lay folded over the couch. The place no longer felt temporary. It no longer felt like 2 people simply sharing rent. Ethan reached for the keyboard before Noah could type anything. Slowly, he entered a single word. Home. Noah read the screen without saying anything. His smile arrived quietly, growing little by little until it reached his eyes. I like that, he said softly. Me too, Ethan answered. A gentle breeze drifted through the open balcony door, carrying the scent of cedar, trees, and fresh rain. They stepped outside together, resting against the railing while the neighborhood carried on below them. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. Someone walked a golden retriever across the street. Wind chimes echoed softly from a nearby porch. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary moments. Somehow they meant everything. Noah looked toward the skyline before speaking. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Ethan nodded. Sometimes. Do you regret the years we lost? Ethan considered the question carefully before answering. I regret the misunderstanding. I regret the silence. But if life had not taken every wrong turn it did, I would not be standing here with you now. Noah smiled, his shoulders relaxing as though he had finally set down a weight he had carried for years. That sounds like something worth believing. Ethan glanced toward him. There is one thing I know for certain. Noah raised an eyebrow. What is that? Ethan smiled with the quiet confidence that had taken 5 years to find. If I ever have something important to tell you again, I am not trusting old emails or forgotten letters. Noah laughed warmly. That is probably a wise decision. They remained there until the sun dipped lower across the Seattle skyline, watching golden light settle over rooftops and tree-lined streets. Nothing extraordinary happened. There were no dramatic speeches, no grand gestures, no perfect movie ending. Just 2 people who had finally found their way back to each other after years of believing the other had walked away. Sometimes love did not arrive with fireworks or impossible coincidences. Sometimes it returned quietly, carrying familiar laughter, shared coffee, unfinished conversations, and the simple realization that home had never been a place at all. It had always been the person waiting on the other side of the door.